The 805 Focus is brought to you in part by Nonprofit Connect. Nonprofit Connect provides superior leadership tools and resources so nonprofit leaders and board members can make valuable decisions to move their organization forward to a sustainable and vibrant future. More information on services online at nonprofitconnect.org.
Welcome to 805 Focus. I'm Dr. Sandra Sinclair with Nonprofit Connect, and we will be bringing you the latest on your favorite nonprofits, so get ready to be inspired. Our special guest today is Gary Clark, and Gary is the director of the Collaboration for Social Impact, and that is under the umbrella of the Santa Barbara Foundation. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Cinder.
Thank you so much for being here. This is an exciting project, and I'm just eager to hear all about it. So maybe you can tell us how it started, what your role is, what your sort of dreams are for it.
Sure. So the Collaboration for Social Impact is primarily focused on strengthening the nonprofit sector and doing that through a number of different vehicles. One is actually small capacity building grants. Another is leadership development, also offering professional development opportunities for the nonprofit sector, as well as trying to connect the connective tissue of various opportunities for organizations to collaborate together.
Wow, and so, all right, so when did this start? When you are...
I started 2 weeks before the pandemic hit.
Oh, golly.
So yeah, it's been quite a tumultuous couple of years. So hit the ground running very, very quickly to provide a number of resources to nonprofits in their immediate response to the pandemic, as well as the ongoing adaptation that they've had to do. Yeah. A good example of that is right off the bat, we knew that many nonprofits were going to need to pivot to online and how they were going to deliver their programs if they could, but also working remotely. So almost half of our grant dollars in our small capacity grant program actually went to nonprofits to purchase technology so that they could either work remotely or pivot their programs.
And so the Santa Barbara Foundation, of course, people know them for donating to nonprofits. Nonprofits write a grant, they get funded. Donors love giving to the Santa Barbara Foundation because they know that their dollars are going to be so well spent. And so now it sounds like the Santa Barbara Foundation at some point decided to create this Collaboration for Social Impact in order to strengthen the nonprofits in other ways, in addition to giving out dollars through grants.
For sure. I think it's very common to understand philanthropy through the lens of grant making.
Sure.
I think a lot of donors have an opportunity to learn more about what it means to invest in specific capacity building initiatives. So a good example of something like that is that we gave a grant specifically for capacity building to the Good Samaritan Shelter to do disaster planning. So that's not specifically tied to their programming. It's more how to look at bolstering the capacity of the organization itself so it is resilient when crisis appears.
Okay, so let's just use that as an example. Give me an example of what you did to bolster the capacity.
Well, that specifically was funding, bringing in a consultant to work with Good Samaritan Shelter to develop a disaster preparedness plan.
Oh, all right.
And so one of the wonderful byproducts of that investment is that now a staff member of Good Samaritan is actually a leader of the volunteer organization's Active in Disaster, VOAD, which is a collective of nonprofits that have all realized that they need to play a significant role in response to disaster. So that's a wonderful example of investing in the capacity of an organization versus the still very critical investments in programmatic offerings.
And you have such a rich background in working with nonprofits. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, sure. I got my start volunteering at New Directions in Goleta. They provide travel opportunities for folks with developmental disabilities. And then from there, I continued to volunteer at various nonprofits. And then I worked in the corporate sector for a while in high tech and was doing corporate philanthropy. And then from there, I moved to the Fund for Santa Barbara, where I was for a little over a decade.
Yeah, that's where I've known
And
you
that's
from.
where I started to develop my passion for helping nonprofits actually build their own organizational capacity. So really looking at nonprofits through an organizational development lens and trying to understand what do they need to be sustainable and resilient.
That is great. That's perfect. And so then when it was time for them to find a director for this new collaboration for social impact, there you were.
It
That's
seemed like
perfect.
it seemed like a natural progression for my career, for sure. So I was
Yeah.
grateful that Santa Barbara Foundation identified me as the candidate.
And I bet you're having a good time with that.
Well, I'm not going to lie, COVID has been very challenging and tumultuous, but I do appreciate the fact that Santa Barbara Foundation has really prioritized resources for the program. We're still looking for more resources to flesh out the program even more, but we're really excited about the investments that we've already made, specifically in organizations like Leading From Within for their leadership development program.
It's a good example.
The capacity building program at the Fund for Santa Barbara, which is also a longtime partner. Our investments in nprnsb.org, which is the nonprofit resource network, which is essentially a digital hub for the nonprofit sector to help keep that peer learning environment and connected with each other. And again, small capacity building grants. So.
Okay, so how can individuals, people who really care about nonprofits, donors, how can people help nonprofits build their capacity and strengthen themselves for the future?
Oh, there's many different ways. First and foremost is unrestricted funding. So the more strings tied to donations, the more challenging it can be for a nonprofit to kind of manage those dollars. So really prioritizing flexible funding, but really in-kind support as well is really critical, whether it be volunteer service on a board of directors. I really think that we have a tremendous bench of talent in this community that is still somewhat untapped as far as leadership capacity and for folks serving on boards of directors. Right now, that's a huge concern of our nonprofit sector, is that we really need more people to step up to the plate and volunteer as board members.
Yeah, and I hear nonprofits saying they're really looking for more diverse board members, people that are younger who aren't used to thinking of themselves as board members, but still it's great for the organization, good for them.
For sure. In a nutshell, representation matters.
Yes.
And what that means is that nonprofit leadership should reflect the constituency that they serve and the demographics of our county. And our recent report on the nonprofit sector actually identifies that we're struggling in that area. It's a bit lopsided.
Okay, let's talk about this report because it's really impressive. Look how big, how many, 100 pages practically.
Almost 96.
Yeah, yeah. And so
But we do have an executive summary on our website, so if folks don't want to read 96 pages of a report, yeah, they can.
But I also like this, every now and then you say, SBF reflection, and you sort of summarize the findings, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, the important thing in approaching this work is, research needs to be independent of the funders that are funding it. And yet we wanted to share what our reflections were on some of the findings so that folks could understand kind of what our lens is on the data and how it applies to our communities.
And so you really spearheaded this report, is that right?
Along with a few other members of the SBF team, for sure. Yeah, Stacy Fury, our new Evaluation and Learning Manager, and Rubai Yestes, our VP of Programs.
And you worked with some folks from the University of San Diego?
Yeah, the Nonprofit Institute. They've been doing similar reports like this for over 10 years. They also worked on the Causes Count study, which was
that
put
was
out
big.
by the California Association of Nonprofits, which was really trying to lift up the nonprofit sector and really amplify its voice and helping the general populace understand that, you know, it's an economic force. The nonprofit sector is an economic force. 1 in 14 jobs is a nonprofit job in the state of California.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot of people. That translates to about 15,000 employees in Santa Barbara County.
And so when you think about Santa Barbara County, north and south, I found it fascinating in your report that you really, if I remember right, you were saying that there are a lot more individuals living in North County with fewer services as opposed to the South County. Is that right? I don't know. So anyway,
Yeah,
maybe
so
you could talk
the
about
balance, you know, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but essentially the nonprofit assets in South County dwarf almost 20-to-1 the nonprofit assets in North County.
Holy
And yet the populations are not the same, meaning it's rather dramatic. And so, I mean, I think most people can see that. If you explore our county and drive to the other communities, you can see evidence of a much greater need. And so, yeah, that is the type of data that we're trying to lift up so folks actually see that and understand the disparity between South County and North County and the greater need that we see over in other communities to the north.
And I think the Santa Barbara Foundation is really being very intentional about finding out about those disparities and addressing them however possible.
Right, and helping move the conversation on that as well to help advocate with our local legislators so that they're clear about what the needs are in the various communities, for sure.
So as you were putting this report together and as you've been working with nonprofits and all, especially during this time of the pandemic, what have you seen in terms of challenges that nonprofits have had with as a result of the pandemic and how they have been creative in their response?
Sure. Well, I'll start early on in the pandemic. They have been incredibly innovative. And I just want to say that the nonprofit sector historically is very innovative. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
But early on in the pandemic, it was the pivot of programs to online and finding a way to serve their constituents however they needed to do so. So it's just, in the report, there's some incredible stories of adaptation and innovation. So I'd encourage people to check that out. Specifically, you know, one of the real big challenges for nonprofits during the pandemic is many organizations that relied heavily on earned income had those revenue streams dramatically impacted. And so they had to pivot, and many of them did not have experience applying for government grants nor receiving government grants. And so there was a skill set there that wasn't necessarily available. And so there was a lot of help needed to educate nonprofit professionals on how to access government dollars. But also that changed their business model a bit. And so they're looking at revenues now coming from different streams, and now the change is going to continue to happen because some of those government streams are not being renewed. And so nonprofits are now going to have to assess, all right, we got this influx of revenue from the government. The government may not renew these revenue streams, so we may not be able to apply for these. How do we figure out how our business model is going to support bringing in the revenue to replace that?
Wow.
If it's not going to come from the original sources that it came from prior to the pandemic starting. So the business model planning is a critical component to capacity building for nonprofits, is so that they really understand that if they have a dramatic shift in revenue, that they understand how they can pivot their model to be more sustainable.
That is
So,
just
It's very important, and a lot of people don't realize that that's,
Right,
if many nonprofits are so lean that they don't necessarily have the wiggle room to make a substantial change like that, and that's why we're working really hard to try and make sure that they have the skill set and the professional development opportunities available to them to do so.
So the Santa Barbara Foundation then is helping to
Yeah, a good example is we knew right off the bat early on in the pandemic that organizations were going to be challenged with their financial literacy, and that they may have been really set and really clear about how their finances were at that given time, and they kind of had a very predictable pattern, but because of the pandemic, much of that was thrown into chaos. And so we instantly reached out to a consulting firm to provide one-on-one financial coaching to nonprofits, to some select nonprofits who we knew would be able to benefit from it right off the bat, and that really did pay off. And so now we're looking at how do we continue that learning opportunity within our nonprofit sector, so that they have that skill set and that confidence in being able to massage their business models and address any financial literacy issues they might have inside their organization.
That is just amazing. Such a practical response. So I'm wondering, when you look at other community foundations, do you see any of them putting together such a practical response or support system for nonprofits?
I think there were quite a few community foundations that, have capacity building programs, so to speak, meaning either through leadership development or providing, workshops on various nonprofit disciplines. So I do look to some of our sister and brother foundations around the country and see what their program offerings. And I'm proud to say each time that I look, I feel like we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I'd say you're doing a really good job.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's think about this report again, because I've been reading it and it is fabulous. I encourage everyone to get a copy of that.
In the back, we do have a list of 5 key recommendations, and one that I would like to lift up probably more urgently is prioritizing workforce wellness. And what I mean by that is it's not just really paying attention to how stressed the the nonprofit employee sector is, but also understand how we might be innovative and creative in providing more creative benefits to really sustain and retain the talent. And the nonprofit sector is experiencing exactly what the for-profit sector is experiencing, and that is real tremendous difficulty in attracting new talent as well as retaining existing talent. So that is top of mind for myself and Santa Barbara Foundation, as well as many other foundations, is how do we just really bolster our nonprofit sector staff. They are so critical to the sustainability of our sector and maintaining the social safety net.
So give us an example of how a nonprofit might do that.
Well, it's going to be creative hybrid operations moving forward. I think that's going to be key. I think there are jobs that can be done remotely, and I think that some of the employees in the sector are really enjoying being able to work remotely, and I think some nonprofits are actually seeing higher productivity levels. But it just really depends on the employee. Some people really prefer to work in the office, others don't. And I think it's going to be really about leading, a more creative approach to how you keep employees engaged and happy.
That is fabulous. So, all right, we have about a minute left.
Okay.
What else would you like people to know about the Collaboration for Social Impact and/or this report?
I would say of the 5 recommendations, I just would encourage everybody to read those and check them out. We do have an executive summary up on the website, so a reminder that you don't have to read the whole report. But those recommendations I really do think that folks should pay attention to.
Yeah. Or a person could get the whole report and they can just read through these yellow squares like that.
Exactly.
The SBF reflection.
Yep.
And then if they're interested in the data behind it, they can then dig around in a couple of pages.
And we also have the full PDF of the actual report is available on our website
Okay.
as well. So if they want to read all 96 pages, they've got it, and they don't have to print it. They don't have to kill any trees if
Yeah.
they don't want to.
Good, good.
But it's certainly available. And and I think the thought I would like to leave folks with, viewers with, is anything that they could do to appreciate the people that have been on the front lines of the nonprofit sector it would go a long way. Everybody's exhausted.
Yeah.
Everybody's really tired. But our nonprofit employees deserve a deep, deep amount of gratitude.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for all of your good work and for being with us today to share it.
Thank you, Cinder. I really appreciate being here.
And thanks for joining us on 805 Focus, and we'll see you next time.